Hello and welcome to the Relationship Hub, the place where you can hear from real couples who talk openly and honestly about their relationship experiences, something we rarely find in our world of sensationalist stories and filtered social media posts. Angie and Will Topping got married in autumn 2020, and today they're joining me to tell me the story of how they met, how they navigated an engagement during lockdown, and why they went on to have their wedding during a global pandemic, something that many couples chose to put off and postpone. And they're also going to talk a bit about the early experience of their married life together. Angie is a paediatric physiotherapist and Will is an electrical engineer, and they live in Bristol. Angie and Will, it's really lovely to have you here on the Relationship Hub. Now, I nearly always start from the very beginning. So how did you meet, and was it love at first sight?
So we met in the summer of 2019, and we had my brother recommended Will in the winter before then, but I wasn't quite ready for dating.
She said no.
I didn't know who you were at the time, and then we were both ended up on a dating app, and I was really uncertain about it, but Will was great. He sent a lovely message. We met up a few days after. We went strawberry picking for our first date, just outside Bristol, and then probably had about 3 other dates that same week. And then by the 4th date, I think Will's very good at reminding me, he asked me to be your girlfriend, and that was very exciting. Was it love at first sight? It's a good question.
Not quite, but very soon afterwards, I think.
Yeah, it was definitely like an attraction from the first date. Will was sat on a wall outside a pub when I first saw him. I thought, oh, you are lovely.
Yeah. I think it's quite nice too that you said obviously your brother was trying to persuade you that you should consider Will, but it wasn't really until you went on that first date that something more happened perhaps. But do you ever feel a bit bad about that, Will, that she took so much persuading, or is that okay?
Well, she claims that because she didn't meet me and I didn't see a photo, there was nothing. It was just there's a guy that I know, so it was very.
I have no name.
No.
Yeah.
I'll take solace in.
I was going to say my brother still takes credit for this.
Yeah, he'll dine out of that for quite some time, I'm sure. So obviously you very quickly had a date, few dates on, became boyfriend and girlfriend. Sort of what happened then? I mean, how soon after did it become much more serious and you thought, actually, we should be engaged? Was that a quick kind of rapid thing, or?
I think in my mind, yeah. It was 3 or 4 weeks. Our parents both got engaged very quickly, and so we chatted about that quite early on, so I had that in the back of my mind, but they were too quick. So I was then, after a few weeks, thinking, I think I could marry this girl. And then it was 9 months before we got engaged, I think.
I mean, some people would still think that was quite fast, wouldn't they? They'd still say it's... But it's interesting because I've talked to different couples before, and there's this sense that actually when you know that someone is the person you would like to be with, there might be so much still to learn about them, but there's a sense of knowing that this could work and being willing then to make everything else work around that once you know, which therefore I think absolutely says having a shorter engagement, as some people might see it, absolutely fine. So tell us when you got engaged, because I believe it was a sort of quite a significant time of the year, that a time that the whole nation will remember, not because you got engaged, but tell us when it happened.
Yeah, so just over a year ago, just as the restrictions were coming in, I put all my plans in place and spoken to Angie's dad and had everything lined up. And so I wasn't really going to be deterred by the restrictions. So just over a year ago, which was they're not great timing, not having being able to do all the normal post-engagement things that everyone normally does.
Yeah, and actually, sort of in retrospect, you sort of, I guess, knowing what was to come, people might think, well, would you still have got engaged then? Or do you think you still would have got engaged at that point if you'd known that this whole global pandemic was going to sweep through the world?
I think so. I mean, we talked about it shortly afterwards again. Was that the right thing to do? But I think the assurance of going, okay, this is going to be really tricky, but no, okay, we are engaged. We've got that longer term commitment, I think was a good thing. And we were very glad of that. Yeah.
So how did you navigate engagement during lockdown? What was that like for you both?
So immediately after we got engaged, obviously lockdown came in, bubbles weren't a thing. We were living in separate homes, so we couldn't actually see each other. So that was really, really tough,
Wow.
emotionally very draining. And I think a lot of our celebrations when we got engaged were kind of joint Zoom calls with friends and family, which was fantastic. But it was quite a painful time of having this build up of getting engaged and then not being able to see each other and get excited about planning a wedding. So that at the beginning during the first lockdown was tough. And then restrictions eased and we were able to meet up and go for our walks when we were allowed to meet up with one other person. So that was great. And then just as the summer came and restrictions eased, we were able to spend more time with each other and we were able to get back to Kent and London, which is where our families are from, and able to actually celebrate. I think it took us to August, wasn't it, when we were finally able to see everyone.
So obviously challenging, but it probably made it all the sweeter when the summer came and you could then at least go for those walks and connect with each other. And obviously you're engaged, you'd set a wedding date for the October, hadn't you? So last October was when you were due to get married. So not only were you navigating an engagement during lockdown, you're also trying to plan a wedding. What on earth was that like, trying to do that? And did you think to yourselves, do you know what, let's just put it all off, to the year after?
Yeah, I guess that I'd always had it in mind, this like sort of the time frame of get engaged in the spring and I'd hopefully get married in the autumn. And we talked about, do we delay it a bit the next year? We didn't really want a winter wedding, but then just thought 12 months and on and on and on. And we sort of thought, well, so Angie working in hospital saw the reality of restrictions and COVID and things like that. And we thought it wasn't going to be getting better anytime soon. And or at least the winter was going to be bad. And so while we thought and everything said, the autumn's going to be fine, October could be okay, I think we sort of thought we got a window, let's go for it. Otherwise, who knows how long we're going to be waiting.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm assuming, based on, say again, conversations I've had with other couples, that during that time that you must have made some plans and then you must have had to change them and then probably change them and then probably change them again. So how was that for you? I mean, did you have this dream wedding in mind, and how did that change as the months went by?
So I think after we'd got engaged, I think both of us had very similar ideas and that we would have loved to have had a big wedding. So originally our guest list was going to be 150 people, church wedding, lovely reception, and a big party celebration in the evening. That took us up to about July sort of time, July, August, when we thought, things are still not easing. July, they had just brought in, you could have a wedding ceremony with 15 people, but no reception. And we thought there is no way within a few months we could be able to go from no reception to 150 people. So we, around August time, I think it was, we then came up with kind of our three plans. So a plan A, which was our dream wedding, which we assumed we weren't going to be able to do. Plan B, which was a smaller number of people. Plan C was just literally 5, 6 of us, however many we could have at the church. To get married. So it didn't stop us. It didn't make us think, gosh, well, we're going to have a smaller wedding, so let's postpone until next year.
So whatever happened, it was plan A, B or C. Whatever happens, you were going to get married. So, I mean, why were you so determined that you thought we're going to do it A, B or C, this is going to happen?
I think we just once you set your mind on it, and I think we started to plan life and accommodation and that sort of things all lined up. And I think we just got excited for life together and didn't want to, I think, sit in limbo and be like, oh, when's it going to happen? And constantly waiting.
And I think potentially as well, because we had the separation, not being together during the first lockdown. And that was quite a painful time, to then have another year, potentially even longer, coming into this year, there's still not the certainty. being able to see each other and spend the time together. I think the marriage was just more important to us than we realised at that point. The marriage was more important to us than the wedding party, as it were. Being married was more important.
So potentially that process almost highlighted for you the value of what you were doing. Clearly you both had similar values and thoughts around marriage, but even so, do you feel as though you've learned something more about why marriage is important to yourselves because of this process that perhaps you might not have done?
I think we've, from very, very early on, seen that marriage is the long-term thing, and the ceremony, the day is the start of it. And there's that huge celebration. It is so exciting, but we know it's a lifetime together, a lifetime of working and building. So just to get going on that is the exciting thing, and there's so much to learn.
And I guess the lockdown and COVID and not having what we had hoped for with our wedding, and the constant obstacles and like raising your hopes and then having them, taken away from you, that in just with our relationship was quite a challenge in some ways. And so we learned a lot during that process. And so I guess when you strip away the enormity of a wedding and you're just left with the crux that is just the marriage, it highlighted for us even more just how special and how precious that is. No,
that's exactly. I think that's probably what I was wanting to understand a bit from you. That it almost, for me, the stories that I've encountered, the people I've talked to, there's this sense of there's a real spotlight on the marriage and what that means, and that process almost has enabled that to come to the fore in a way that perhaps it might not have done. So let's just have a little think about the wedding day itself. So how different was your wedding day compared to what you'd imagined and what you had? What did that wedding day look like for you?
So how was it different? So we sort of did everything we'd hoped for. We've had a number of friends that did really strict, that little barbecue sort of thing, but we thought we want to go big. We want to have the photographer, the car, the big church, or as much of a big church thing, and a nice meal and anything we're allowed to do. So we sort of went for that still, just with a slightly smaller number, but it meant that we could cherish all of those people. I think having that smaller number of people, each person there was so important to us that we could really love each of them and actually have a proper conversation with each of them, which was really nice.
One thing I haven't asked you actually about is that, of course, you'd planned a wedding for October, but you didn't get married in October, did you? We've talked about postponing weddings. You did the opposite, didn't you? What happened?
So it was September 24th of September at lunchtime, and the government announced that they were actually going to tighten the restrictions earlier than they had planned. I think they'd originally said kind of middle of October, and then suddenly they thought, no, the cases are rising, so we need to reduce the restrictions. And the restrictions were going to reduce from the 28th of September, and we were meant to be getting married on the 3rd of October. So within 6 days, we were just off the being able to have our 30 people with a reception. The restrictions meant that you could only have 15 people at the ceremony, but no reception. So we had a little moment of panic, and then we got our heads together with the help of parents and friends, and thankfully, like miraculously, the church was available. Our reception were able to accommodate. We were at the Beacon in Tunbridge Wells, and they were
fantastic.
Cancelled all of their annual leave to bring the day forward to the 27th of September. Our photographer could come. The cake could be made.
Amazing.
Our florist was. All our suppliers were miraculously able to accommodate, come and bring the date forward. It did just suddenly mean we had, we're getting married in 4 days as opposed to a week and a half. So, and
all our 30 as well. We quickly phoned around like, can you do this 27th? They're like, yeah, great. Everyone, I think it's actually the photographer that was the first one. He sent me texting, have you seen the rules? Do you want to move it forward?
Yeah.
And I thought I was all over the place at that point, but
yeah. Because
So,
I mean, we're sort of smiling about it now and thinking, wow, it's amazing. But you must have been feeling, oh my goodness, this is just like, we can't halve it. Can we do this? It must have felt like a real mission to try and pull it off.
Yeah, absolutely. I was at work at the time, and I had to someone at work came and told me as when I was mid-treating a patient. I was like, that's not very helpful. And I broke down. I think we were so emotionally exhausted from the process anyway. And I think we just got everything in place and we thought it's just next week, we're almost there. And then suddenly, nope, next week can't happen. And just the emotion and stress around that was...
I think in hindsight, the actual day, it then meant we had this ridiculous 5-day sprint to do everything.
Yeah.
We were down to the sort of the 10-day mark. So we're getting everything ready, but then down to cutting down 4 or 5 days and moving everything meant that the actual day had that real, perhaps it added to the crescendo of the whole event.
Yes.
It was all we had the rehearsal on the night before. We both sort of fell apart a little bit, but then came back together for the day, I think, on good form.
I can imagine it must have felt like such a heightened sense of emotion because, as you've described, this roller coaster, you get engaged, you then can't spend any time together because you're not living in the same place. You wait for the walks that you can do. You can only walk out together. You can't go anywhere or do lots of the fun stuff. And then suddenly, you're all the time gearing towards this date in October, and then it all changes again. I mean, it does sound utterly exhausting. But again, when you reached that day, that sort of moment, did it feel like, everything's here, it's in place, this is going to be the day, this is it?
Yeah, from the moment I think both of us woke up that morning, we felt so peaceful, so calm, and just so excited. It was almost like the previous 6 months hadn't happened. It felt, I'd say I've never been married before, but it felt like a wedding day. It was just really exciting, I think.
I was expecting to be exhausted as well. I think all the normal preparation, I thought, I'm going to be tired on my wedding day. And then the 4 or 5 days leading up was just ridiculous. But I think we both felt really refreshed. And so, it was such an incredible day. And we kind of flew through the whole thing still, which is a bit of a miracle, really.
So did you ever feel at any point as though that you'd had the plan B or the plan C, or did it feel like the first, the sort of the plan A almost, although it wasn't plan A, did it suddenly move up in its pecking order, or was it still a substitute wedding almost?
No, definitely not a substitute wedding. If someone had told us before we got engaged that a pandemic was coming and you were only going to be having 30 people at your wedding and probably you won't have the big party in the evening and it's really going to be stressful, I don't know how we would have, I think we would have been miserable. But actually having had the day with our 30 people, it didn't feel like a second class wedding. Everything that we did was as we would have done it for a wedding day. The only thing we didn't have was more people. But the ceremony itself was really intimate. It was so special. The reception, we were able to have our wedding breakfast. We were able to have our speeches. We had our cake, all the things that you generally, or some would generally love to have at a wedding. And then we were able to have our first dance. It was outside. Thankfully, the wind had stopped because it was a very windy day, under the stars, and it was just magic. We had a little MP3 player in the corner and had our first dance under the stars, which was amazing. And a lot of our friends that have got married during the pandemic, I think, tell us that they would like to do something like a proper wedding this year or next year. And we both agree that we don't feel we need to. The wedding, it was our wedding day. It was, we don't feel like we need to do it again, do we?
No, I think we worked out the things that we were really excited about and were really special. And I think that there's that slight, it would have been great to have that big party and that big celebration of it, but that because we had so many of the other little bits that made that we were really excited about for our wedding day, it meant that just wasn't a big deal, and we can always have a party another time.
Yeah, absolutely. So in some ways, would you say that you feel as though you perhaps benefited from this stripped back smaller wedding, this micro wedding, and that the experience that brought, the different dynamics of having fewer people there? Do you think there was any benefit for you as a couple?
So the big thing that we noticed was we potentially had a bit more time just throughout the day, because you're not moving the masses of people, and 30 people still feels like a great crowd. It doesn't feel small. And I think as well, we just loved that we could speak to each guest that had come, and it wasn't a quick hello, thank you for coming and moving on. It was, we had good conversations with everyone, and especially with the pandemic, having not been able to see any of them, it was made it all the more special being actually able to be in the same room with everyone and have the conversations.
I think so there, it was nice to relax. I think some weddings you see the bride and groom running around unbelievably stressed because they've got to go here, got to do this and that, which we didn't have at all. And we also saved quite a bit of money, which is always a great benefit.
Yeah.
Which helps to begin married life, doesn't it? You know, stuff that you want to do in the house, etc. So do you think you'd recommend it to other couples? Is it something you think, you should consider this?
It would depend on the things that are important to you, I think. If we do love to have a big part, we love dancing. That's one of the things we bonded over, and so that was something that we were really excited about. But for anyone that's not a big deal, and I absolutely recommend it. It's the day a lot. Yeah, there's so many great things we can say.
I think there could be a real pressure. Just from speaking to friends, they go, "Oh, I don't want to get married until, we're saving up. We need to get enough money for a huge, great big wedding," or they almost feel a bit embarrassed by the fact that they've had a smaller wedding, or I haven't had a proper wedding because it's not been a big wedding. And we had a very little wedding in comparison to the majority in this day, and it felt probably more special and more precious than any other weddings that we've been to. So would definitely recommend.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. I'd like to just, if you like, sort of talk a little bit about wedding vows. And the reason I wanted to do that is because I think sometimes people have different views about committed relationships, whether you need to be married or not or otherwise. And obviously one of the significant moments of a wedding day, the moment, is saying I do to one another and making promises to one another. How important do you think those promises are to you as a couple, and just generally, what do you think that those promises make any difference to your relationship going forward?
Yeah, I think incredibly important. I think making that public commitment and those promises to each other, it's sort of been a reminder that we go back to. We bought some mugs that have been written on now, which is always quite fun to enjoy. And I think having that reminder of that there is that long-term commitment that you have made, that it's and that you're going to stand by that, and it defines that sort of that dedication, the selfless dedication to each other. Yeah,
no, absolutely. Angie, did you want to add anything to that at all?
I was just going to say, friends of ours had recommended that every so often, every anniversary, that you actually go back and look through your vows, because you, over the years, might forget, if you know what I mean, the promises that you have made. And I think the words are very powerful. The vows are quite powerful. They're big promises to make. But which I think we will probably do.
I think that's a lovely idea, the idea of going back to them, because actually something that is perhaps not talked about enough is that when people get married and they've started, this married life together, and that need to keep investing and looking after the relationship, and actually using your vows as a kind of a point of contact, and actually going back to that day and thinking, are we still doing these things? Do they still mean the same thing going forward? And obviously people don't have to do that. There are other things you can do as well, just to keep on just checking in with the relationship. So I think it's a really nice idea. It's quite simple, isn't it? Just looking back, and it gives almost greater emphasis to those promises that were made. So you've been married just such a short time so far, but did you feel prepared for married life? I mean, did you feel that you needed to be prepared, or were you just kind of, we fell in love over the strawberry picking and it's all happened super fast, and we've had the wedding and it's been a global pandemic? Were you ready for marriage, do you think?
Yeah, I think thereabouts, as you say, we weren't together that long. So any preparation, we sort of took any words of wisdom that came our way. One particular thing was the marriage prep course that we did through our church, which was really useful. It just kind of helps you to talk through the expectations of married life, and it was great to teach us how to communicate. I think just gave us some tips and some ideas. That's been really helpful.
Yeah, and so do you think go on. Sorry, Angie.
I was just going to say that friends of ours have given us books which are very practical I was quite sceptical to begin with, but actually they were really useful. They were, one's called For Men Only and one's called
Women Only.
For Women Only. And you read the one about the opposite person. So I learned a lot about men that I didn't know before, such as your whole compartmentalising your thoughts. And it was brilliant, because I then go to them and be like, why on earth do men do such and such? And you'd be like, well, why do women do? And it was very useful.
I think it's interesting you said, a bit sceptical, and I think people can be of that sort of stuff, can't they? They can be a bit, do I need to read a book about this? I love this person, really? So it's interesting that you were sceptical and actually said, it's beneficial. So I think I absolutely endorse anything that encourages couples to grow in their relationship. That's something I would choose to do and do choose to do. And actually, it's great that you've talked about it, because I hope people that are listening as well were thinking, okay, it's not such a big deal, I will do that. And if it's going to help your relationship and help fulfill those promises you've made to the other person, that's got to be a good thing, hasn't it?
Yeah, and I think those conversations can be quite awkward. So I think having a go at them before you're married, and then that build-up is quite, okay, we've done this once, we got over it, and next time when it is worse or whatever, it's easier to talk.
Yeah.
So I think, again, it's one of those interesting things to reflect on. You hadn't lived together beforehand. You'd had this pandemic sort of engagement, wedding scenario. How has it been for you? Because partly I'm interested because, again, I'm just thinking about different viewpoints that are out there. And some people feel that they wouldn't want to get married quickly because they need to get to know somebody, they need to move in and get to know somebody, etc. So how has the beginning of your married life been? You've, actually moving in with one another. How have you navigated that? How did your marriage prep stuff kind of kick into place? Did the books help? Had there been any difficulties? What's it been like?
So I'd probably say it's a journey. So it's been so much fun. There's, living together is just really fun. But it's definitely come with its challenges. I think if we had entered married life thinking it was going to be a breeze and a walk in the park, then we'd probably be kidding ourselves. The big thing that people used to talk to us about was communication. And we'd be like, oh, yeah, sure, we'll talk to each other. Like, that's easy to do. And actually, having moved in together and trying to establish rhythms around each other, and especially in lockdown, we're not seeing other people, so we're just with each other all the time. Learning how each other works and habits and different ways that we communicate. So it's not always talking. We've discovered that we have different ways of trying to express how we're feeling, whether we're feeling really happy or whether we're not feeling very happy, and reading each other. And we've definitely had many miscommunications, which we've learned from. So for example, a minor one, but we went for a bike ride about 2 weeks ago, and there's every so often on this bike trail, there were these metal barriers to basically stop the bikes going through too quickly. Yeah. And I just really struggled to get through. And Will was behind me and said, Ange, just put your foot down. And I was like, oh gosh, right, what do you say? The quicker you go through, the easier it goes through. So I was trying to bomb it through these, thinking that it should be easier. And then I was like, I'm just hurting myself. Why? How is that meant to help? And Will was like, no, put your foot down on the floor. Don't put your foot down as in to go more quickly. Which sounds like a minor, but there's been many occasions when we've just misunderstood each other.
Yeah. And actually, it is often the minor things, and it's then not allowing that to escalate into getting really irritated with the other person, because it's always small things, isn't it? I mean, you've said, it's a bike ride, and you said do this, and I did that, and it's not a big deal in the great scheme of things. But in that moment, it's hurting, and he's giving you rubbish advice as far as you're concerned, and you're trying to kind of work that out. And I think the thing is, we can laugh about it now, but it's when too many of those things keep happening and you don't then seek to communicate and understand each other. And in this sort of very sort of easy conversation we're having now, we can chat about it and it's happened. But it's in the moment, it's not always so easy, is it? It can be frustrating, and being able to work at those things is crucial, isn't it, for relationships to work? Just an interesting sort of perspective that I've picked up is that, for one thing, I know that lots of young people, there's stats, there's research, lots of young people, young adults aspire to be married, to actually be in a relationship like marriage, it's going to work and last, and really seek that out. And it's almost as though there's this idea, this is what we'd like, but we don't really know whether it's going to happen. It feels like the sort of thing that people used to do. And actually, it feels like a big risk to actually commit to one person. You know, what if it doesn't work? What if it doesn't last? Do you feel as though marriage is, you know, was it a risk for you, do you think, in doing that? Do you think it is a risk? And what gave you the confidence to get married?
Yeah, I think it's always a risk. I think you're making yourself vulnerable, which can lead to pain a lot of the time. But I think, yeah, I mean, you never know it's definitely going to last. But I think we came into it fully aware that it's going to take work. And even, like as we've just been saying, during lockdown, and in our honeymoon period after getting married, we're still working on it and very aware that we need to learn to do these things to manage it, because that risk is always going to be there. But if we're learning how to deal with some of these issues, learn to talk and work our way through it, then we should be okay.
And I think potentially being surrounded by a lot of, being a rom-com fan, you see how Hollywood does it, and you go, goodness, well, if that's how Hollywood does it, then it should be easy. You know, you just meet, you fall in love, you get married, and happy days. And I think knowing that that's not the case before you go into it, a bit like Will was saying, is the reality of the fact that it does take some work. But to know that, like, the love that you feel for each other, you know, sometimes you need to choose to love them rather than feeling like you love them, you know, especially if I've irritated you, to be kind to me if I've really made you grumpy, then like, that's hard work. But then it's the learning to choose to love them, I think we found helpful. And
I think there's that tendency to be wary of commitment, which in some areas I'm terrible, but I think, I don't know, some reason with you I found it easier. But and I think I didn't really, through my 20s, I wasn't looking to just float around, and it's always think, well, the grass is greener somewhere else. But I think I'm up for working on our lawn and make it as green as it can be, but it does take work.
And I'm glad you've said that, actually, because I think sometimes when things get difficult, people think, well, this is too hard, then it perhaps it isn't meant to be. I should just drop it, or it shouldn't happen, rather than thinking, actually, I probably just need to work at this some more. And that's true of life, isn't it? In everything that we do, whatever we seek, you know, whatever we set out to do, if an obstacle comes up, if every time that happened, we said, oh, well, I'm out of here, this is not happening, work or whether it's parenting. I mean, if you gave up parenting because it didn't go quite as you planned, you know, it would all have been over a long time ago for most people, because nothing ever goes to plan with children. So actually that sense of, that's what commitment is about, isn't it? It's saying, even when things get tricky or difficult or irritating or whatever it might be, whatever brings a challenge to the promises that you made, being willing to stick with those and knowing that actually you love this person and they're not meaning to do a lot of the things that they may or may not be doing. It's happening just because it's two characters, two different people coming together and finding a way forward. So do you think that for you two, that you will, you know, is it something where you think, okay, how are you worried about how you're going to keep your relationship maintained, looking after it? Is it something that's looking after, or do you think, okay, we've had a marriage prep, we're on course? What do you think about, just that sort of maintenance, I suppose? That sounds like a dull word, but do you know what I mean? It's just ongoing, keeping things going.
I think absolutely, a bit like a car, you do need an MOT every so often, because I think as we get older, we will definitely change. You know, 10 years' time, we won't be the same people that we are today, just because that's what we do as humans. So I think checking in every so often and having an MOT, almost just seeing where you are, whether that's kind of doing a marriage course of some kind, or just regular date nights and just checking in and talking to each other and finding out where they are, and checking that the things that they still like or don't like are the same, or whether those have changed. And
lockdown's been an issue on date night as well, because before we'd always I'd be like, yeah, great, date night, I'm keen for that. But now, because we're just here the whole time, it's been interesting the sort of a night in isn't a date night. And I guess because we're now perpetually having nights in, I'm like, well, we're spending time together, man. She's like, no, we're not spending time together. So it's still to make an effort and set up time, special time, and put phones away and have a night that is actually just the two of us enjoying, just being a couple and that kind of thing.
You've said a couple of really good things there, actually. I think one thing that you talked about, Angie, was about people changing and almost not making an assumption about the person you're with because they've done it this way, that we do change, and checking in and finding out what's important to them still, making sure that you are both on the same page with things. And I think this whole idea of just keeping on with what you've got, looking after it and caring for what you've been given is such a crucial part of relationships working and lasting. And I think as well what you were saying there about date night, being intentional is so important, because as you say, when we've had sort of periods of lockdown and every night looks the same, doesn't it? You know, how do you change it up? But actually trying to change it up, trying to do something different with it, or not having your phones, or saying, well, on this night we'll do such and such, or, I might make more of an effort to put something different on, or that feels more date night, or whatever it might be. And it could sound a bit rom-com and a bit twee to do that. Some people might think that. But actually there's something about separating out the time that you have together and saying, no, this is focus time on one another. This is how we're going to build. That's not twee at all, is it? That's a really good thing to do. Well, thank you so much to you both for talking to me today on the Relationship Hub and sharing your story. I think it's really inspiring, and I think that actually one of the things that I was interested in about your wedding day, for example, that actually, however you want to do it, whether you want to do it big or small, the point is you don't have to do it in a particular way. It is about what you say to one another, those promises that you make to one another. That is the crucial part of it, that intimate moment that makes a marriage. And actually that's the star of the wedding, isn't it? Sometimes this party can be the star of the wedding, and actually it's the moment of promise and intimacy that is the star of that day. So thank you very, very much. And thank you so much for watching the Relationship Hub today. Please do like this video. Please subscribe to the channel. Tell others about it. Thank you so much for listening today to the Relationship Hub.